you ready for this.
Gonna be fun.
You will not stand in my way.
Frostborn. Hunger. This pleases me.
I do not fear you, mortal.
Your soul shall be mine.
Don't make me laugh.
Needs a brew?
Oh, I do.
Feel a shredding, baby. Let the battle begin.
So hello and welcome to the 46th episode of the Nexus Trolls, a podcast all about Heroes of the Storm, part of the Trolls.gg podcasting network. So I'm your host, Linus Daz Kilius, and I'm joined today, as always, by Mystic and LiQuiuD. How's it going, boys?
What's up, Daz?
It's going good, man.
We've got a very special guest today. If you're watching this live or you're watching the video stream, you can probably tell who it is. But if you're watching the audio stream, let me do a little intro for him. He's a content creator for Galeforce eSports. He's a record holder for the most Chairly games cast. He's the man that forced Blizzard to take Hanamura back to the drawing board. He literally wrote the book on tanking. Some have even called him the Sun Tzu of Heroes of the Storm. Today, we'd like to welcome to the show Cavalier Guest. Cav, welcome to the show.
I have no follow-up to that introduction.
Right? Like, what do you say after that?
I remember from last time we had you on, I totally forgot to mention the Art of the Tank. We should have talked about that as well. It's something you wrote quite a while ago, I believe, maybe over a year ago. But that got quite a bit of recognition as well.
Yeah, Art of the Tank was actually the first thing I ever wrote and published for the Heroes of the Storm community in terms of a written guide. And it was actually amazing because it immediately got endorsed. I was actually whispered or DM'd, I guess, by Michael Udall on Twitter, like right after I published it. He was like, "Who do you play for? What teams have you been on? How do you know these things? How are you stealing our secrets?" And he was like, really, he genuinely wanted to know, how did you figure this stuff out? Because I as a player who've been trying to become a pro player, because he wasn't, I think he'd just become like a full-time pro player at the time. I think he'd already run dorms. I, as a person who's been playing this game on my own for a long time, have figured out the stuff on my own from talking to other people. I don't know who you are. Why do you know these things that took dozens of people, scrims, hours, conversations to figure out? And I was like, well, I watched other players do it, and then I explained why it worked.
Yeah.
And he was like, oh, yeah, I guess that makes sense. And then King Caffeine endorsed the guide, and Alex the Pro G ended up endorsing the guide too. So.
And see, I need to comment on that. That's what bothers me this week. You have me talking about Leoric, and Cavalier Guest is here. It's like, dude, like, that's as bad as playing Muradin in front of King Caffeine. Neither of those things is fun to do, okay?
But you know what, Cavalier Guest, I think we had you on like maybe 6-7 episodes ago. You've been like the most requested as someone who everyone's wanted to come back by our listeners. I loved the strategy talk that we had in that past show. People can feel free to look up, I believe it was show 37, but you can check it out. I mean, Cavalier Guest's name's in the title of the episode, so it's not hard to find. But we're really glad to have him back. We've got a lot of strategy talk today because of it. But before we get into that too, last episode we talked about Cavalier Guest's ambitions to become a coach. How are those ambitions going there, Cav?
All right, so this is gonna happen. There's a thread on Reddit right now. People can go look it up, upvote it, downvote it, whatever. But I was doing my normal stream today. We were talking about strategies on Tomb of the Spider Queen, actually, and how laning strategies have evolved in Tomb of the Spider Queen. And at the end of the stream, I have always a Q&A. Someone asked me, do you think NA can take a set off of an EU team? When do you think it's going to happen, and which team do you think is going to do it? I made a prediction back in January that NA was about 18 months behind EU, so it would take 18 months for them to catch up and take a set. And then the question was, which team do you think is going to do it? And my answer was Team Freedom, because I think Team Freedom has better self-analytics, which means they're going to improve in the right directions, faster identify their mistakes, and figure out what they have as a team that's going to bring them together and allow them to play their strengths. But I was like, it's almost a coin. I said it's almost a coin flip between Roll20 and Team Freedom. And then I said, one team got a coach that would help them identify the strengths they need to work on and the direction they should take their personal meta, their personal style of play, that team would probably end up winning. And then I said, if anyone from Roll20 is watching, I will put my money where my mouth is on this. I will guarantee you a set win against an EU team, and you won't have to pay me until the set win against an EU team happens. This clip got posted on Reddit, and the head of PR for Roll20 responded with, Not sure about paying for what we already anticipate, but he's welcome to contact me with rates after we've taken the first most important step, qualifying. So that happened.
And that's pretty amazing. The fact that you never know where things will go as soon as something gets clipped and put on Reddit, right? So, anyways, we're rooting in your corner. I'm gonna call it now. The next time we have it on the show, we're gonna be introducing you as coach of blank team. Any team that has you is definitely a boon for them. Okay, so we've got a ton to talk about on the show. Like I said, we're going to have to be talking, of course, strategy because we got Cavalier Guest on the show. A couple things we're going to be talking about specific in terms of strategy is how to optimally play the first 5 minutes. And we're going to go over about 5 maps if we have time. So we're looking at Cursed Hollow, Infernal Shrine, Sky Temple, Dragonshire, and Towers of Doom. Because anytime I've listened to Cavalier Guest talk, like he actually broke down a replay that I was in the Hurricane Harvey stream that he did, I believe, last week. And luckily, you didn't rip into me too much. But some of the things you were talking about there were very interesting to me, like, you know, make sure you get level 4 before you get to the first objective, things that I never would have thought of. That usually takes like a very analytical person or someone who's a student of the game to really know about, that a lot of like regular people wouldn't know. So I can't wait to pick your brain on how to optimally play the first 5 minutes. We're also going to be talking about popular suboptimal builds. Because in that said replay, a friend of mine, Black Magic, was playing Vala, and he also got ripped apart by Cavalier Guest for taking the AA build. And I think on stream you said that that's a suboptimal build in most cases. So I'm interested to hear about that amongst other suboptimal builds that are popular that we're going to be talking about later in the show as well. Of course, we've got LiQuid's eSports Corner. LiQuiD also missed last week too, so we skipped on talking about Leoric until this week because we knew that LiQuiD would kill us if we didn't let him get him involved in that conversation. And then finally, at the end of the show, we're going to have the return of the HOTS debate, which will be a great one, I am sure. But before we start the show, we also want to thank our patrons over at patreon.com/trollsgg. The show's always going to be free, but if you're looking for a way to support the show, a great place to do it is over at patreon.com/trollsgg. Every little bit helps. Myself and LiQuiD are going to be ordering t-shirts and sunglasses, all sorts of crazy swag to give out at BlizzCon very shortly. So any money that's in that account from Patreon is going to be going towards that. And go ahead.
I also want to throw out, you can PayPal us directly if you just want to donate money and don't want to sign up for Patreon or Twitch or, you know, Cheer or any of those other sources of income that get sent our way.
Yep. And we'll be putting out a bit more information about t-shirts and stuff. We're also giving people the opportunity just to almost straight up buy one, I guess, before we put the order out. So keep following us on Twitter, just at the Nexus Trolls, to keep an eye out for that. We also have a Troll of the Week this week, and I'm surprised we haven't acknowledge this person as Troll of the Week yet, because we've had him on the show a couple times. Alebeard, aka our crack research team, because it frequently happens before the show starts. I head over to blizzpro.com, where Alebeard is a content creator for, or a writer for, and we check to make sure if there's any news or anything we missed. And Alebeard thoroughly covers pretty much any little tidbit of information, and you can find all of his great stuff over at blizzpro.com. He's a great person, great friend of the show. Thanks, Alebeard, for all the crack research you've been doing for us. Okay, I guess we should just jump into the news then. Here we go. You think I'd have these bumpers queued up by now, but here we are.
Someday, this will make a great story.
It's like I don't know these things are coming for some reason.
I'm telling you, the magic is in the stream.
You have notes, you planned the show in advance, and still a surprise every time.
I do. I'm like, oh crap, we've got the next segment. I need the bumper lined up for it. But anyhow, we've got some news. LiQuiD, do you want to take the first one here? I'm assuming this is your note here.
Yeah, this is mine. So much like, let's see, I think Heroes for Harvey was 2 weeks ago. We now have Heroes for Irma coming out this weekend. Friday night from 9 p.m. till Sunday night at 9 p.m. on twitch.tv/Heroes for Charity. And actually, I was reading through it. Cavalier Guest is going to be one of the streamers on the show this weekend, raising money for Hurricane Irma victims.
I'm tentatively scheduled for Sunday, but I don't think the official schedule's been posted yet. So yeah,
it has not, yeah. And so looking forward to it. Good cause.
Yeah. How did the stream go for Heroes for Harvey there, Cavalier?
I think it went really well. I did something pretty different from what most of the other streamers are doing, because most of the streamers are playing themselves, playing the game, either doing viewer games or just Hero League. And I did something I do on my channel on Thursdays. On Thursdays it's sub replay analysis. You get into a raffle if you're a sub, and you get a chance to have your replay analyzed. But this is just anyone who donated, you could upload a replay, and I would analyze it from your perspective, talking about camera movement, ability usage, cooldowns, talents, map rotations, where you should be, when you should be, why you should be. And people kept donating for replay reviews, so I'm assuming people enjoyed it a lot. And I think we ended up raising $350, something like that, during my segment. So
I feel a significant portion of that came from Black Magic as well. I on the stream, when you're analyzing his replay, you're like, I don't understand why he keeps giving us money. I keep ripping into his play here, and he keeps donating more money. I thought that was pretty awesome. But yeah, I mean, it's obviously a great cause, both Heroes for Harvey as well as Heroes for Irma. Heroes for Irma, the link for that's in the show notes if you want to check that out after the show. We also had a BlizzCon pre-show. I got in my email inbox a couple days ago my BlizzCon ticket, and along with it too came some notice that we're going to have a BlizzCon pre-show that was today at 3 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. I watched the whole bit of it. It was pretty cool. They did a little bit of an unboxing of some loot and stuff that you can purchase, but also some of the in-game rewards were announced. At least the first of many. I'm assuming they're going to be coming through the pipeline. You can get Horde Online dual player mounts that are now available. This is obviously for WoW, not for Heroes. But during the next few weeks, or the several weeks leading up to BlizzCon, we're also going to be getting news dropping of the in-game items for all the other franchises, including Heroes of the Storm. So keep an ear open for that. If you have a virtual ticket, or if you have a ticket for BlizzCon, you will be eligible to get some of those goodies. And also, the other interesting news that dropped from this, and I'm assuming you probably go and watch the replay of this, is that the virtual ticket, which I purchased last year because I didn't have the opportunity to go to BlizzCon, it's now going to cover all stage content, which it didn't last year, and that was extremely frustrating. I actually spent a lot of time talking about that. Mike Morheim was on that BlizzCon pre-show, so I'm excited for those who aren't going to have the opportunity to go to BlizzCon. It's obviously a lot of money to go to BlizzCon, but you get a virtual ticket and check it out. You can watch all these things live. You can watch the VODs and everything as well too. It's a great way to consume the content. Cav, I'm assuming you're going to BlizzCon?
I don't know if I'm going to BlizzCon yet. Actually, last year I got 2 passes. Because I got one for casting so many Tier League games. Superdove actually bought it for me, and I ended up getting a press pass via Storm Legacy. So I may get another press pass this year, or GFE may get me a pass. I didn't buy a ticket, but I may end up going anyway.
Well, we hope to see you there. But if you're not going, I'm assuming you'll probably be picking up a virtual ticket regardless.
If I can't go for whatever reason, I will pick up a virtual ticket.
Yeah. So HotsAPI.net, we talked about that a couple weeks ago with LiQuiuD. It's picking up steam. It's got over 2 million replays uploaded. LiQuiuD,
yep.
Since we were talking about this before, what's your take on this? Is this slowly leveraging itself as potentially being a competitor for HotSlogs?
Yes and no. So I'm still of the opinion that HotsAPI.net will never actually be a direct competitor to HotSlogs, because they don't plan on doing the front end themselves, right? I do stand by that I'm actually impressed with how many uploads. They're actually at 2.3 million and still climbing pretty quickly right now. And StormSpy.net is actually the first one to use the API from HotsAPI.net. But he has said he has a lot of work to do on the site, and it's not quite where he wants it, and that kind of shows. But the uploader from StormSpy.net is pointing to HotsAPI. .net, which is good. Like, I mean, these are all the things that we were hoping to see out of this. It's just a question of when will they catch up, or will they catch up with HotSlogs, or, like, in the end, what's going to end up happening. If you look at StormSpy.net right now, though, they're claiming to have only parsed 240,000 replays, which is probably part of the issue with, what you can get out of StormSpy.net right now, where HotsAPI log, like, the idea was brilliant behind it, because the guy's literally like, just give me all of your replays and I will host them so somebody else can parse them for you. It's just getting there, right?
Yeah, Kat, what's your general take on HotSlogs? Like, when you look at the win rates and builds everyone takes, is it something that I guess everyone should take with a grain of salt in general, but do you think it's a bad thing for the community in that it kind of forces a lot of people into taking maybe suboptimal builds, which I guess we might be talking about later.
There was a time last year when Blizzard said Tracer had like exactly a 50% win rate when people were talking about nerfing or buffing her, and her win rate on Hot Slogs was 49%. And so people were like, oh, Hot Slogs is reasonably accurate. Since then, Blizzard has released a couple of other random statements about win rates on heroes that aren't played very often, particularly the recent Chen nerfs, how he was over 55% across the board in all game modes, and he was at 45% on Hot Slogs. So either Blizzard made an inaccurate statement there, and that's not the only example, there's been a few more, or so few people have started uploading to Hot Slogs because of the stigma that it has as a site now, that the information for unpopular heroes is inaccurate, and there's only enough data to track the meaningful win rates of popular heroes. That really limits it as an effective tool for analysis, unfortunately.
Yeah. And I guess too, the other thing we can never really tell is if it's taking a representative portion of the population to when they're gathering these statistics on Hot Slogs too. Like there might be, a trend that more like serious players or something, I guess he said across the board, Chen was showing high win rate. In my mind, I mean, I don't know exactly how it shakes out, but I'd assume that, players that play more dedicatedly and play more consistently would probably be more likely to upload Hot Slogs, whereas those more casual players probably wouldn't even know about it, and you get like maybe less accuracy in like the lower levels. However, I mean, who knows what the slice of the population is to see if that can be statistically accurate as well, I guess.
Yeah, it's pretty speculative, and you're looking at some heroes like I'm looking at Samurai right now for unrelated reasons, but I have the last 10 weeks of data checked, and I'm only looking at Hero League, I'm only looking at Master and Diamond, and his highest win rate build is 71%, but it has 108 games played over 10 weeks. That's not right. That's not statistically significant. And then his most popular build is only at 1,500, again for 10 weeks of data at the highest, 5% of MMR. That's not meaningful. I can't really infer anything from that about whether or not certain talents have better win rates or worse win rates in this particular game mode. So for really popular heroes, it still has enough data to be meaningful. For unpopular heroes, it doesn't, and that's a pretty sharp cutoff from last year when we had heroes that were pretty much plus or minus 2% across the board, according to some Blizzard statements that Blizzard had made.
We're probably guilty of spreading misinformation too. We often, like, just after Heroes release, we usually record this on a Wednesday. So, Hero release is typically on Tuesday. We look over Hot Slogs to see what they've like hit the Nexus with in terms of win rate, and it'll only be like 100, 200 games played or something like that. And we usually talk about their win rates, which is, like you said, so hard to judge. Just not only are they just a brand new hero that everyone's trying out, but the statistical relevance of the data that we sometimes give out can be very questionable because of those reasons. Right. So we also had some changes. Well, we had some changes, but Blizzard just told us about them to the AI system in game. This is mostly for people who are playing AI games. This wouldn't affect you necessarily if you are playing just quick match unranked ranked. There's a blog post about it.
Unless you're an NA pro, in which case you occasionally have to play the box.
Right.
Yeah,
to warm up, right?
AI Murden wins games for you.
Yeah, 100% win rate in North American HCC.
I still think it's so strange they didn't like pause the game or hold it off for a bit, but still, I guess maybe they didn't need to change AI.
The pause rule is 10 minutes, so they had paused the game for 10 minutes, and he couldn't reconnect, so they had to play with the bot. That's in the official rules.
Gotcha.
Yep.
Well, either way, that bot Muradin is probably going to get a little bit better. Because all the heroes since Garrosh have actually been using a new AI system, and all the old heroes are going to be transitioned over. There's a blog post about it. They basically have a new AI in-game engine that's going to be faster. And just to give you kind of the TLDR, it's going to be a smarter AI. They're going to do things like stutter stepping, which they were before, have better positioning in team fights, better decision making on a macro level as well, and smarter strategically too. So if you're an AI player, again, it's not like your beginner recruit AIs are going to all of a sudden get stronger. They're just going to be maybe smarter, especially on the higher end. I imagine maybe those elite AIs might actually be elite and maybe a bit more difficult to defeat. So that'll be interesting to see how that shakes out. But I thought I'd like to point that out since we had that on the docket. Okay, so that's about it for news. So we're just going to slide into LiQuiuD's eSports Corner.
Hey, yo, how you doing? It's time for LiQuiuD's eSports Corner. That's right. And you're going to want to stick around for this.
Take it away, LiQiuD.
I love that thing every time I hear it. All right, so just a couple of things. We're gonna keep it kind of short because we always run over on debate nights, and I feel bad for that because I like to talk esports. All right, so we're going into the home stretch to see who's going to BlizzCon and who isn't, and we got some teams fighting it out. But before I jump into the big regions, I'm going to go ahead and say that Southeast Asia Deadly Kittens was the first team to qualify for BlizzCon 2017 this year. They have done it. And over in Taiwan, we have Soul Torturers qualifying, defeating Team Facecheck in the grand finals for that. Latin America and Australia, New Zealand will be done at the end of the month. Latin America is going to Brazil. ANZ, I think, is playing in Australia in Sydney, but I need to double check that. And then this week, actually, before I go this week, also in the EU, Fnatic has secured their auto bid to BlizzCon. So no matter what happens, they're definitely in. Of course, they want that first place seed. So I'm sure they'll continue to win their way out through the rest of the games they have before going to BlizzCon. I picked 5 games to watch this weekend, mostly because these 5 games have some kind of result to what we might see at BlizzCon. Friday at noon Eastern, we have Tricked Esport playing Team Expert. That's good and got some second/third place conditions around that, right? Dignitas has been struggling, but seems to be on a winning streak lately, sort of. And Tricked and Team Expert are coming up closely behind them. Can't talk tonight. Then Saturday on the opposite end of the spectrum at 2:00, we have Team Good Guys versus Team LiQuiuD. This is actually for a bottom of the bracket, who's going to be in Crucible trouble and who's not kind of match. Both teams having a rough part 2 and want to see what happens between those two teams. And then at 5:00 over in NA Eastern time again, we have Team Freedom versus Space Station Gaming. Should be an interesting game. NA, like, kind of blew up this weekend. I don't know a better way to describe that.
It's an understatement.
Like when we're gonna really talk a lot about it on trolling tonight, but like I was left scratching my head.
Can a region that's inconsistent have upsets?
That's a great question. I think in this case they can, only because it was like the teams beating the other teams were like how did Lag Force do what Lag Force did and like take tempo to 3 games? Like what?
So the answer to that question is that Lag Force is actually practicing for the first time since they've qualified for HGC.
The entire year, this is the first time they're practicing.
I wish I was kidding.
Oh no, I believe it. Oh no. I'm not disbelieving you. I believe it. I think if you look at their history, the 2 times they practiced were for the little bit of time leading into the Crucible just to make sure they stayed in HCC, and then now, which I have no idea why now, like other than you're out from under the thumb.
You lose your sponsor and you're like, oh man, we should start trying hard now.
Right? Like, come on, really? Anyway, so NA is just wrecked. So yeah, but check out Team Freedom versus Space Station Gaming. And then Sunday, the 2 games I'm actually truly looking forward to all weekend happen on Sunday. At 7 a.m. Eastern, we have MVP Black versus L5, which L5 seems to be finding their footing. I think they may actually take MVP Black, which I'm sure I have Bacon cursing at me from somewhere out there on the interwebs because he is an MVP Black fanboy. And then at 5 p.m., the NA game to watch, Gale Force Esports versus Roll20. Personally, I pick Roll20 to win that game, but NA. So
what I really want to know is who Cav picks to win that game. You might have a little vested interest in one side.
That's a great question.
So here's the thing about Gale Force. They take any team they think is as good or better than them semi-seriously, and they'll actually they're a field team. They play by field. They play by momentum. They're highly emotional. And so like for instance, Fane in particular, if he really wants to win, he has a different mental state that he gets into, and he can't access it unless he actually thinks the game's going to be challenging because it's more fun for him. And Roll20 is going to pull that out in him. So we're not going to see the Gale Force we saw last weekend where they were like, this is probably going to be easy, and then Equinox punished them because Equinox played with them for months and knew every single mistake that they made regularly as a team, knew all their drafts, and was like, I know everything that you guys want to do, and I'm just going to not let you do any of it. Just and then they were very frustrated. This is going to be a different type of set. I still think Roll20 takes it. I think it's going to go to game 5. I'll say that. So it's going to be Roll20 3-2.
100% it's going to 5. I cannot, like, I really want to see MVP back versus L5 because I think you see really interesting stuff when you watch Korean games, especially at the macro. Actually, macro and micro. Like, the entire game is, like, just fun to watch. Gale Force versus Roll20 is going to be one of those games where it's, like, there'll be moments where it's, like, excellent to watch, like Korean, and then there's going to be moments where it's just, like, rocky, and it's just, like, a raw street fight, like, people knocking each other down kind of ugly draft. Like, Roll20, you want Garrosh and Medivh? No, sir, we will not let you have either of those type things. Like, we're not going to let you play your game. We're going to make you play our game. So, like, I'm really looking forward to both of those sets on Sunday. I will be sitting in my nice new recliner watching on my nice new TV.
So, Cav, let's fast forward to BlizzCon a little bit. Who do you expect to be the top 2 teams on the stage at the very end in the finals?
I expect Fnatic to be up there 100% of the time. I don't think that Fnatic gets knocked out by any other team right now. They're simply too strong. The only way that happens is if they get overconfident and stop practicing, and so their level of execution drops, which is possible. They currently don't have a coach, and coaches are one of those things that when you're on top, coaches keep you there. They make sure that your practice stays consistent, your play stays consistent, you keep improving even though you're already considered the best team. Consecutive championships happen in regular sports, and it's almost always attributed to coaches. Consecutive championships don't tend to happen in esports because teams don't have coaches. I think that's my explanation for why it happens in regular sports and not in esports, like, ever. I'm sticking to it. The question is going to be who's the number 2 team. Is it going to be one of the other EU teams? Or is MV Black going to iron out the inconsistencies that they've been having because of their roster / role swaps? Kyocha is improving really rapidly on support and arguably is the weak link right now from watching their games. So if Kyocha can lock down that role and the mindset behind it, I think that MV Black has the best chance of being the number 2 team going into it based on what we know now. But boot camps can change that. Fnatic improved, and of course last year Fnatic improved markedly in the 2 weeks before BlizzCon because they did nothing but scrim L5. The reason they lost L5 was at the finals they actually revealed literally every strategy to L5 in order to beat MVP Black, and they ended up doing that and then losing, like, handily to L5 because L5 knew exactly what they were going to do. They showed it all. We could have another situation like that. We could have another situation where teams show up 2 weeks before because they have to for the round robin stage, get that level of scrim practice in, and teams the team that benefits a lot from that environment is Dignitas. Dignitas has always been one of those grinding teams that if they can just sit down and play game after game after game, they have the stamina to focus and make every game matter in terms of improving. Dignitas may not make it to BlizzCon, though. We have to acknowledge that as a reality right now based on the current standings. It is possible they don't even get to go.
True story. Yes, it is. Absolutely.
And so, final question for you, Cav, related to esports. Is there a dark horse team that we should be watching?
Freedom.
Yep.
If there is a team from any region that is going to perform better than expected, it's Team Freedom.
So I have a couple of questions now because see Daz, you opened the door. Now you have to deal with the punishments.
That's okay.
All right. So last week we were talking about this on Trolling. Not last week. It had to be the week before. No, maybe it was last week. Anyway, Fnatic. The thing that concerns me most about Fnatic, because personally I think Fnatic is sitting on top of the world. They can keep it. But because they've been on top for so long, you tend to start drooping off, right? And it's not that you don't have the drive or anything else. It's just, like, you can only stay on top for so long. And, yeah, a coach could help you stay there. But I struggle because I think without a coach, they can make it through BlizzCon. BlizzCon's so close. I think after BlizzCon is when they're really going to start to struggle. Because at that point, it's too late almost, right? They only have, 48 days till BlizzCon, I think.
I mean, it's something like that, but you got to remember that they already dropped a set to playing Ducks, like, randomly.
Yeah.
they already had a drop off because they already thought they were untouchable, and they pulled back from that. Their mindset has improved drastically. They're like, we're not gonna let that happen again. Oh no, not. We're focused. We're back. But once they qualify, this weekend is going to be the big indication. Are they still focused this weekend? And then are they still focused in the round robin stage when they have to travel fatigue maybe causes some issues for them? Do we see the same Fnatic this year at BlizzCon that we saw last year? Are they that focused again? That's going to be the time when we're looking at them like, yes, they're performing, or no, they're not. I do agree that if they win BlizzCon, they may have a problem because we haven't seen teams consistently repeat for a while in Heroes of the Storm. They just get to a peak and don't know where to go from there and drop off, and then someone has to pass them, and then they're like, oh yeah, we can catch up to those guys, and then they catch up to them and they pass them again, and it sort of ends up being this wheel of the top teams passing each other.
Great problem to have.
All right, and then the other question I want to bring up, so you were all on board with MVP Black, but I guess the question is, no love for SPT?
I don't believe in SPT's ability to actually show up to BlizzCon as a whole team. Because it's never
that's a valid point, right?
It's literally never happened. We have never had an actual Chinese team at any event outside of China.
That's a fair point, but
they always miss someone because of a visa.
If we assume that the entire Super Perfect team makes it to BlizzCon, how do you feel that they rank up against everybody else?
Top 4.
Okay. All right.
SPT has one of the most infuriating drafting styles of anyone ever. They will bust out Murky to counter your Dahaka on Dragonshire, and they'll win because in the late game, Murky wins that lane. And he has a comparable pseudo global, and he'll just like walk into a fort and die and be back top lane. And you're like, God, he's rotating faster than I am. I can't keep up with this. And they do that. They do that to people. They pull off these macro strategies that are just infuriating to play against. And because no one else does them, people don't practice against it.
Right. Like, so, why would you?
if SPT can actually show up as a 5-man team, I'll say they got top 4.
Cool.
I don't think it's going to happen though.
I'm hopeful. For once, I really want to. So I'm following Chinese HGC more now because it's more available. Where in the past it was a little more difficult to find sometimes. And I gotta say, like, I like SPT. I like CE too. Both teams I feel like are great teams, and I would love to see either of them do well. But until they show up as 5 people, like, I just don't see it happening.
All right. Let's move on to the strategy segment too. We've got so much to talk about still. We still want to squeak in that debate. I really want to get that debate in today. The last thing I want to do is have to cut that. So like I said, Cavalier Guest, of course, he's going to be here when we're talking strategy. No better person to have. But before we get started, Cav, do you want to tell everyone, I guess I should have done this off the top of the show, do you want to tell everyone where you might be, talking strategy and such on the interwebs? I
stream Monday through Thursday over at twitch.tv/Cavalier Guest. On Mondays, I do the HGC post show where I talk about eSports for the week's series you should watch from the weekend. A lot of people don't follow every single region, so I recommend one series per region if you want to check those out. And then I open the floor to questions from the audience, Twitch chat, so we can talk about drafts, why teams won, why teams lost, why talents were picked, stuff like that. We do a lot of analysis. I usually come in with 2 or 3 ideas of things I want to talk about, but a lot of that show is community generated because it's people were confused about something, people didn't understand something, they can come and ask questions and get pretty reasonable detailed answers. And then on Tuesdays I do replay review for subs and now for viewers, but there's a luck factor. Subs have more luck, and on Thursdays it's viewer only or sub only. And then on Wednesdays it's normally going alone. I focus on solo laning, but this week, for instance, because laning matchups have changed so dramatically in terms of rotations, especially on maps like Tomb, where we're seeing 1-5-4s and all sorts of other shenanigans and 2-1-2s. I actually did 4 replays from Tomb of the Spider Queen where there wasn't a solo lane. Essentially, it was all rotational macro play. And it's interesting that teams have decided that solo laning is so difficult to draft correctly that we're just not going to do it. We're just going to have multiple people in a lane. The double support meta contributes to that a lot as well. So there's some other considerations there, but it was a fun show.
Yep. And general streams you do too are great too. It's nice to see a lot of strategy talk. A lot of streamers typically it's mostly them playing the game, streaming it, right? Whereas I like the breakdown analysis that you constantly do with all your replay analysis and everything too. So, but now we can talk about what we've been waiting to talk about for most of the show: the strategy for the first 5 minutes of certain maps. Now, we were talking about this a bit prior to the show, but if you can win the early game, it gives you an advantage into the late game. A lot of the early game is very formulated. I feel that, after a certain point, it gets a little bit harder to predict. But the first 5 minutes, there's a lot of predictable elements that happen on most maps. So we wanted to bring Cavalier Guest in today to talk about these 5 maps in specific. So let's talk about the first one off the hop here, Infernal Shrines. This is a map Cavalier Guest picked, and this is also the one that I mentioned before was the replay analysis where myself and Black Magic got torn a new one on our play. So it'd be interesting to see what Cavalier Guest has to say about this. So let's start right off the beginning with the draft. What are the considerations for the draft for Infernal Shrines? What should you be drafting, or what do you need to prioritize here in the draft?
You need some sort of either stall plus a soak off soak hero for the objective itself. By stall, I mean either someone who can zone off the objective and delay safely, so mobility on a hero, or people who can steal last hits effectively, so area damage and reasonable range on your area damage. You want someone who can solo the shrine if you're going for a shrine-centric strategy. For instance, if you draft Sylvanas, you automatically have a shrine-centric strategy because Sylvanas doesn't get value unless you win the shrine. So you need to win the shrine in order to get the value. If you draft a Zul, Zul can double soak during the first shrine. And if you delay the shrine for a minute and 15 seconds or so, like basically 2.5 waves, a Zul will basically get all the ammo from 2 lanes and significant tower damage, more than the average first Punisher is going to get. So if you lose the first Punisher very slowly and you have a Zul, you end up ahead. Because of the Punisher's poor early game scaling, it's a really important consideration. Do we want to go for the objective, or do we want to delay the objective and get some value? We've seen Korea last year ran Ariel Hammer comps, and they were just like, no, that's fine. You can have the objective. We're just going to push with Hammer. They got a fort. just randomly pushing with Hammer, and they lost the first Punisher. The Punisher got not a wall. The Punisher didn't even get a wall because they responded for the defense so efficiently. And you have situations like that. So are you a shrine composition? Are you a macro composition that doesn't need the first shrine? That's really important. And the reason that matters is because in the first 5 minutes, you can usually tell who's going to get to 10 first based on their execution around the first shrine fight. If you get to 10 first, you always win the second Punisher for free. You can turn that into 13 advantage, and then you're just always ahead of talent tier if you're very careful about what you do from that point onward. So you can turn a correctly executed first 5 minutes into a permanent talent tier advantage until the game's over.
Okay, well, it sounds like there's multiple strategies you can go with here on shrines. Like you mentioned before, you're more of a shrine-centric comp versus one that ignores the shrine almost essentially or stalls it out in the first during the first objective. So leading up to the first objective, what should you be doing? Is there any sort of considerations you should have with your lane assignments and your rotations?
Yes. So the standard is a 1-4 with a solo lane on the top lane. It's standard for a really good reason. The jungle between mid and top is a lot more dangerous to rotate through than the jungle and vents between mid and bottom, which means that you're more likely to get isolated, have your rotations interrupted, and potentially get picked off if you rotate mid-top. So you want someone in the top lane to make sure that the soak happens, and you don't need to win the lane. You're not going to get any super aggression happening. You just need to tie the lane, make sure the soak happens, and then your 4-man is where the interesting thing happens. So the first Punisher, the first shrine starts to spawn. I'm going to make sure I get this exact time right. I should have opened this like two seconds ago. The first shrine spawns at 1:55. So minions spawn a few seconds in, and they take a little bit of a walk into the mid lane. You basically go through 3 minion spawns before the first shrine starts to spawn. So you go mid, you clear that wave. You go bottom, you clear that wave. You go mid, you clear that wave. You go bottom, you clear that wave. You go mid, you clear that wave. You go bottom, you clear that wave. Here's where the funny thing starts. If you leave one person in the bottom lane who has reasonably safe wave clear, and you rotate back to mid as 3, you end up in a situation where if the other team didn't do the exact same thing, you clear that wave first, and if the shrine spawns top or mid, you get 4 first because you cleared that wave first. It's not that you got more experience, it's that you got the experience sooner. And if the other team, and if the shrine spawns away from the lane, the enemy team has to rotate 1 person down there, 4 people down there, depending on how they're rotating, to clear that lane, you get an instant 10 to 15 skeleton lead. And the enemy team can't start the fight on the shrine because you have 4 and they don't. So if you have 2 shrine comps going up against each other, it's really, really critical. And this is a theme for high-level strategy that exists in pretty much every map. Minion waves get timed around objectives. You think about, oh, this minion wave is going to spawn when this happens. This minion wave is going to spawn. It's not like minion, minion, minion. I'm just rotating and getting the soak. It's each individual minion wave is a mile marker for the next talent tier advantage and the next objective.
One thing I need to ask you too, because I mean, my chair league team, we're definitely not pro, definitely not even close to pro. And one thing we always struggle with the 4-man rotation is doing it properly, missing soak, not doing it fast enough. Do you have any tips for people like me who have issues getting that 4-man? Because I mean, the 4-man rotations, I guess, a higher level of execution required to do that, as opposed to just having people sitting in lane and soaking lanes that way. Do you have any suggestions for people who are having problems coordinating that 4-man rotation?
The most important thing about safely rotating as a 4-man is speed of wave clear. So you need to make sure you draft at least 1 wave clear hero that can rapidly clear the wave. And then that hero needs to be protected. So generally speaking, the job of protecting your rotations and interrupting enemy team rotations goes to your tank. So whoever your tank is, if you watch Breeze play DC, this is a really good example, because I was just doing a replay analysis today for Fnatic, and Breeze was just sitting in bushes constantly. There were periods where Breeze was mounted for like 60 seconds, just running from bush to bush, making sure his team was safe. Didn't push any buttons, didn't dismount, just running from bush to bush. Unless the enemy team goes on you and you need to peel, your tank can protect your rotation pretty convincingly. And if anyone ever is slow on the enemy team's rotation, you can get the dismount on them. And if you clear faster than and push into the towers really aggressively at that point, they can force them to miss soak. So it's about breaking down roles. And even in Hero League, if everyone understood that the tank protects the rotation, the wave clear clears the wave, the support backs up the tank and makes sure that if anyone dives on the wave clear, they supplement that. And then you have a 4th hero who's floating essentially in that, because you have wave clear tank support. Whoever else is in your 4-man, can supplement that. If they're the bruisers in the 4-man, they can make sure that other flanks that may be a little bit dangerous are covered, because the tank can't cover 3 directions at once usually. If it's another support, you can generally if you're drafting double support, one of them will also have wave clear, so that also falls into the wave clear category. Like if you have Rhaegar Ariel basically instantly clears the wave with lightning shield plus swift sweep, or not swift sweep, but angelic sweep. There we go.
We knew what you're talking about.
You get into all these considerations about what does a hero do well? What can they do? And you should focus on what your hero can do well for your composition. It's a very team-focused game. You need to have those considerations in the game and in the draft.
Okay, so let's say you've done everything properly. You've got level 4 for the other team, and the objective has spawned. You'd mentioned there's 2 different kinds of comps you generally go for, the shrine comps and the late comps. Like what kind of counterplay, or how does that work? Let's say if you have a shrine versus a shrine comp, or a shrine versus a non-shrine comp, or whatever, like what should you be looking to do during that first objective phase?
If you have a shrine versus a non-shrine comp, generally your shrine comp will have 1 person who's really efficient at clearing shrines. Classically, the best example of this is Kerrigan. Her recent changes make that not consistent, because she can't necessarily one-hit the minions with Q anymore. Which is a talent, but just, by the way, she needs 4 for that. So getting 4 is really important. If you have used to be really important. If you had a Kerrigan comp, you needed 4. It wasn't optional. Sonya, Arthas, Gul'dan, Greymane to some degree are all heroes that can like reasonably quickly clear the shrine. But generally you need 1 hero whose job is to clear the shrine. And then if the enemy team's not contesting you at all, they're just not there, you leave your shriner alone with your tank, generally to zone for them, and make sure that any rotations that happen on them, they have the chance to move away if it's like a big rotation. And you make sure that you're continually soaking the other lanes. You don't want to give up early soak if the enemy team isn't contesting as 5. It's a really, really important consideration. If you have a comp that's linking, you just want to delay that for as long as possible. Generally speaking, you'll have a global or an offlaner, Abathur, Haka, heroes like that, and you'll try to live the fight for as long as possible so that they can get you as far ahead as possible. And you're accepting the fact that you're going to give up the first Punisher, and then defending the first Punisher when you give up is really important. You have to back off the moment it spawns. You have to get behind your gate. You want to make sure while the enemy team is on the shrine that you're constantly pushing out the wave adjacent to the shrine, because you don't want the minion wave draining the ammo from your towers. You want those towers to be at full ammo to help deal with the Punisher. And you also don't want the minion wave pushing in to help do additional damage to the gate, because if the enemy team can kill the gate before the Punisher jumps, or as the Punisher jumps, they can come in with it. And the Punisher's tanking the fort for them, which means they can secure kills. You will lose potentially your entire fort if you don't correctly manage the lane adjacent to the Punisher during the first Punisher phase, especially if they have something like a Sylvanas.
So if you are the team that just won the objective, what should you be doing right away? Like, it sounds like getting that wall is the most important thing.
Yeah, getting the gate. A lot of comps will have a sidewall. There's fisherman comps. One of the nice things about Kerrigan that didn't get talked about a whole lot during her shine in the meta on Infernal Shrines was actually she can fish through the wall. If someone jumps the Punisher, she can combo off the Punisher, and that's usually a kill on anything but a tank. You have deep portals over the wall. There's all sorts of heroes that can just bypass terrain. If you have Genji comps, they can just be like, I'm going over the wall. And Garrosh can actually worse. He can he can come off the Punisher and bring you to him. He can bring you to his side of the wall and kill you. So you want to have heroes. If you're a shrine composition, you generally have heroes that can punish over the wall and do so safely and look for kills, because kills turn into structures when you have the Punisher alive. And
then if you are defending and your wall or your front towers are down, should you be defending that fort, or should you be backing off?
So you jump the Punisher over the gate if the gate's alive. If the gate's not alive, you try and jump it behind the fort, and that means they have to walk past the fort and potentially into the keep towers. You always want to make sure you're looking for flanks from the bushes. I don't even know how many times at this point we've seen ETC flanks in the mid lane, especially from the one vent directly above the keep towers, and it's like, power slide, follow up dive from directly in front, but they didn't see the ETC flank and people died. You also want to make sure that you don't start missing soak. So ranged heroes are really good at defending the Punishers because they can stand further back, and your melee heroes don't do as much defending against Punishers unless you're actually going to be forced to team fight. So you want to send your melee heroes, except your tank, to one of the off lanes that the Punisher's not in, and make sure you're continuing to get that soak. Heroes that can double soak and are melee are therefore really popular or important on Infernal Shrines. Old Leoric with his Royal Focus build, Ragnaros, although Ragnaros has some defensive tools, obviously. Although it's actually better to use Molten Core to secure the shrine than it is to use Molten Core to defend against a Punisher in most cases. Zool obviously can double soak. Sonya can double soak. I think she misses a minion here and there, but she has enough wave clear with Whirlwind to double soak. So any melee hero that can double soak lanes during Punisher phases, because you can safely go do that. Usually, especially if the team is 4 men pushing and they have one person off soaking as well.
There's so many questions spiraling in my head, but I know we've got a few more maps that we want to at least get through. Just before we round out the Infernal Shrines bit, after the first shrine phase is done, win or lose, what should you be doing? Is there anything obvious at that point in terms of camping or pushing out lanes?
So generally speaking, mercenary camps are something you pick up as the objective's about to spawn in order to maintain map pressure. There's some fun little things. If the Punisher does not spawn bottom and you have a second, you can, or if the first Punisher spawns bottom, it's not going to spawn there. If you grab the bottom Khazar camp, it will not interact with the minion wave if there's a tower alive. It will just start DPSing the tower down for free, and the minions won't aggro on the camp. So you're guaranteed to get that tower for free 400 experience without having to worry about minion stacking. There's some wave manipulation tricks. The melee minions have more health, but do very little damage. If you kill just the backline minions in a lane as an objective spawning and then leave, your next wave will get there as the frontline minion dies, and then you'll have a double wave that pushes directly up to towers. Little wave manipulation tricks that can actually give you big advantages when you're talking about these delay comps. And camps are the same idea. You cap them as the objective spawns, so they push while the objective's going on, so you're guaranteed to get some value. Or the enemy team has to clear them, and as soon as you see someone clearing them, you go into a 5v4 and force.
Yeah, making the other team make those tough decisions about, do we clear first or do we go the objective, and having to make those decisions is always very powerful, making them respond to you as opposed to the other way around. Okay, so Cursed Hollow is next. This is, again, a map that Cavalier pointed out as one that he wanted to talk about. So let's start in the same place we started with in the last map. Considerations during the draft. What are you looking to draft in Cursed Hollow?
The two most important things in my mind on Cursed Hollow is the actual late game win condition of Cursed Hollow is the bosses. It's not the tribute. Curse rarely ends games. Boss or a team fight over boss frequently is actually, if you go look at pro games especially, what ends the game. So tools to guarantee that you get boss are really important. And then due to the size of the map, macro heroes. And then the third thing is early game landing pressure can frequently get you significantly far ahead and increases the value of any curses you do pick up by threatening keeps instead of forts. And because of the way tributes spawn, mercenary camp pressure is very easy to pick up. So I want someone who can solo mercenaries. Those are my three big considerations. I want macro, I want boss control, and I want someone who can solo merc camps.
Interesting. And most people I'd talked to, I think, would have said, a team fight comp because everything's so centered around the tribs. But what you're telling me now is that the tribs aren't necessarily the place that you're going to be looking for the win conditions, which is interesting. Okay, so before the first objective spawns, what should you be doing with your lane assignments?
So it's somewhat counterintuitive, but you want to have your solo mercer in the lane where your giants are, which is not your boss lane. And because your siege giants may end up getting an entire fort, you actually would generally want to have, if you're doing some sort of like 1-1-3, you would want to have your 3-man in your giants lane, not in your boss lane, because that's going to get you the most tempo in terms of experience. Potentially, you're actually doing a 50-50 coin flip if the tribute is going to spawn top or bottom, because it spawns adjacent to one team's siege lane, essentially. And if you're doing something else, so that means you'd have your tank mid usually, unless your tank's in the 3-man, which does happen sometimes, and you'd have your whoever your most independent / solo winning hero is in the top lane. You want to have your global in one of the side lanes, regardless if you have a global, because 50-50 chance that they can get more waves and then come to the objective as opposed to having to come to the objective right away. If their opposite number in the lane is not a global, they either have to stay there and not go to the objective at all, or they have to accept the fact that they're going to get out-soaked and lose some value. And then 2 minutes on the dot, you rotate whoever it is who can solo merc. Sometimes you have to rotate 2 people just for efficiency, depending on the draft. But you want to make sure those siege giants are pushing. And then for most heroes, they'll finish the siege giants as the tribute spawns. You want to make sure, this is a big thing on any map where the objective is sort of team fight oriented and everyone sort of usually comes to it. You can tap in the first 30 seconds. Don't use your well past the first 30 seconds, because you want to have your tap available for a disengage and a re-engage on the tribute fight itself. This is true in Infernal Shrines as well. You can use your tap in the first 30 seconds. You can't use your tap past 30 seconds.
Good to know. So let's say you don't have any globals and both siege camps are taken at the 2-minute mark or just shortly thereafter. If you lose the coin flip, should you contest trib still, or should you go clear that merc camp typically?
That's one of those things. It's a rough call to make. There's the tribute spawn in sets of 3. So the first tribute's guaranteed to spawn mid. The second and third tributes, one of them's going to spawn on your side, one of them's going to spawn on the enemy side of the map. Generally speaking, teams that macro will be hitting 10 right as the third tribute spawns or right as the second tribute ends, somewhere in that range. So you're going to have either even talents or a talent advantage if you choose to macro as opposed to contest the trib, as long as you can delay the tribute. So do you have delay? If you have delay, then you can send someone to clear the siege and potentially get value just by solo pushing the lane. If you don't have delay, then the call should be to either immediately give up the tribute and just accept that you lost the 50-50 and get it, go to your bruisers, get your bruisers, push those out mid, and, try and get the next tribute. Or if the tribute's not on your side of the map and you still don't feel confident about pushing in without ults, there are a lot of team compositions that really depend on 10. You can continue to macro and you'll have 10 for the third tribute, and that one you need to win. If it's on your side if the second tribute's on your side of the map, you should try to contest it regardless.
Before we move on to the next map, one thing I wanted to ask you about, just in general, what should you be considering when you make the decision to contest a tribute? Like what factors go in there? Because that is sometimes you can give them up and it doesn't really impact the game too much, as you know. But especially if it's a curse trib, it can have a direct impact on the next couple of minutes. What decisions should you be making there? Like I've seen a lot of teams that I've played with where you might be down a man, everyone's like, but it's curse trib, we have to do this, but then you end up getting wiped, and then the curse ends up being so much worse. What kind of decisions should you be making when you're looking at the trib spawning and the state of the map and your team?
How good is your macro? How many globals do you have? How far pushed out or pushed in are your lanes? What's your camp situation? If you cap camps right before the tribute curse goes down, the camp will basically defend curse in that lane. Are you behind on experience? It's frequently the case where you're like, yeah, you can have the curse, that's fine, because it automatically pushes all your lanes in and all the minions just come to you and you can soak them all. You get that delicious XP and you actually catch up in experience. I don't know how many pro games we've seen on Curse Hall at this point where Dread was talking about, oh, look, they're 2 levels behind. Oh, look, Curse is over. They caught up by a level and a half because of all the experience that got pushed directly towards them, right? Don't take fights that aren't even. Take every fight that's not even in your favor. If you're down and only take even fights if you have something to win. So if you're 5v5 on even talent tiers and you're both on Curse point, yeah, sure, go to the tribute. That's fine. If you're down a person, don't go to the tribute. If you're down a talent tier, don't go to the tribute. Do what you can to mitigate the value of the curse and catch up. Trade bosses. Like they get a tribute, you get a boss. Depending on where it spawns, that's a really reasonable call. I didn't talk about this in the draft, but it actually is relevant. Racing bosses, not only controlling bosses, but racing bosses is really relevant. There's a reason that Q-Build Vala is really popular in the pro scene on Cursed Hollow. There's a reason that Greymane is really popular on Cursed Hollow. It's not just their team fight consideration, it's the fact that they burn down bosses faster than basically most other heroes in the game.
Okay, let's move on to the next map. And I'm going to say the next map is Towers of Doom, because this is the one that I really wanted to talk about.
Okay.
Mostly because, I mean, during the first or several the bell tower phases, you've got that decision that's always difficult where you've got the 3 bell towers spawn at the same time. But we'll get to that in a second, because first we got to talk about the draft. What should you be drafting on Towers of Doom before the game even starts?
So, Towers is a pretty cheesable map. We've seen it hasn't happened for a while, but there was an old EU strat that I loved, which was a wave clear tank. In most cases, it was Johanna, Asmodee, and Abathur, and you just delayed the temples for as long as possible while your summons and your other nonsense AFK pushed in lanes, and it was so difficult to deal with until teams learned to draft enough globals. Because you could usually see it coming early on in the draft, just because of the considerations for wave clear that you had to make in the early part of the draft to make sure your lanes are constantly pushed out. But you can draft either globals or delay, because if you delay an altar forever, people can rotate as slow as they want to. But if you can't delay forever, then people need to rotate fast. So globals. You again want someone who can solo camps efficiently. Anyone who has the ability to bypass terrain is a lot safer on Towers of Doom than they are on other maps, because so many of the fights happen where there's just convenient escape routes for terrain. There's lots of open spaces, so chase heroes end up excelling as well. Illidan, Tracer are heroes that we see quite a bit on Towers of Doom as a result. And Towers of Doom helps, the objective helps you win the game, but it doesn't help you get ahead. It doesn't give you any experience. So you can tactically sacrifice the objective, especially in the early game. Only the last hit really matters, right? And so side soakers like Abathur end up being oppressive on Towers of Doom, because as every second the team is fighting over the objective, even if they win it, unless they secure a kill, they're like, oh man, we got 4 shots, but we're actually behind in experience.
That's one of the great things that I love about Towers of Doom, in my opinion, and I'm sure many others as well. It's the map that's easiest to come back from a core deficit. I'm not sure what else you can call it in this case, but a core deficit where you're down, seemingly losing the game. You might even have that 1 shot left on your core, and it's still comebackable too, because all you have to do is make sure you control all of the bell towers from that point forward, and you can make the comeback. And I'm sure everyone's had that experience where they've made that crazy comeback as well. So how do you do your laning phases during this map as well?
It's a little, so you have bottom is the most important lane, and generally speaking, you always want constant presence in the most important lane. But the way it works out in terms of vision mechanics, top lane is the safest lane to have a solo laner. So you generally put a 3-man in the bottom, but the lanes are close enough together that double soak is possible with a 4-man rotation with enough wave clear, and a 4-man constantly rotating onto a 3-man can be oppressive to deal with. So laning on Towers of Doom can be really complicated depending on the matchups and whether or not the enemy team has really good initiation. If they have an ETC, you have to be really, really careful. It's important to keep vision of the enemy team, because as soon as someone goes missing, you're like, they're on a camp. Let's go do the camp. Sappers are scary. Not only are they actual shots, but I mean, this is a cheese we've seen. Merklord on Sappers basically kills a wall. The wall's just dead. So Mercenary Queen Sylvanas is just for macro compositions that are just trying to not fight and grab camps and push in as aggressively as they can, are actually scary. First Sapper camp gets the wall, and the second Sapper camp basically kills the fort. It doesn't quite kill it, but a little bit of follow up and it's gone. And once you've lost bottom, the enemy team just sits on it and makes it impossible for you to bring it back. They by default have control out of 2 of the 4 towers, 2 of the 4 altar spawns, because you can't go through to the bottom one at all, and you will have a narrow little choke to go through safely to the mid altar, or you can come all the way from the top. But that's a very predictable rotation.
Interesting.
So the number one thing you want to do on Towers of Doom is arrange your lanes in such a way that you get an advantage in the bot lane, and you can cap that tower, convert that bell tower as soon as possible, and just sit on it and be oppressive.
So are you generally saying that the bell towers, like, since they're not going to necessarily get you ahead in experience to get you that level lead, that talent lead, just kind of controlling the map is more important than necessarily making sure that you're getting the objectives?
Yeah, controlling the map is far more important than the actual objective itself. If I could give up 20 shots for a 4-level lead, I would do it every time, because a 4-level lead, I can just cap all 6 towers and win the game in the next 2-3 minutes. Game's over. Okay,
so the scenario I painted at the beginning, you've got 3 bell towers spawning for one of the many phases where that happens. The first couple being the notable ones, or the first one being the notable one. What do you do? What's the best strategy there to make sure you maximize, or does it even matter? Like you're saying here, if you do get 2 out of 3.
So if you're going to contest the first altars aggressively, the most standard strategy is whoever your solo lane is, they walk over to your altar on the left or the right, and then they rotate down to help in the team fight. I actually think this, unless you have a global, I don't like doing this. If you don't have a global, I think it's better to just invade theirs on the top side, steal it, and then back up to get yours, and you get 2, and it shortens the phase significantly. If you have a side soaker, then you go wherever they are, because you just want to delay for as long as possible. So if you have an Abathur, for instance, you just, we're going to sit here, we're going to fight this out, we're going to delay for as long as possible. Abathur's getting us ahead. And so if you have a global, I like contesting mid. If you don't have a global, or if you have more globals than the enemy team, I should say, I like contesting mid. If you have less globals than the enemy team or no globals, I like just actually focusing completely on the top and then ending in the phase relatively quickly and then going back to soaking.
Do you have any other tips or considerations for Towers of Doom before we move along?
Yeah, don't do boss. Unless boss will literally end the game for you or your opponent, just ignore it, pretend it doesn't exist. It's better to convert a bell tower in almost all cases than it is to do boss, and it takes about the same amount of time.
Good to know. I think we're going to skip the last 2 maps just for sake of time, because we do want to talk about the suboptimal popular builds. We did go over the 3 that we specifically identified that we wanted to talk about, but we've talked about before the show, myself and Cavalier Guest, we identified some suboptimal popular builds that are out there that people are taking that they probably shouldn't be in most cases. We're going to do a trap talent segment, but I guess Cav came to the conclusion that most trap talents aren't taken anyways, but there are a lot of suboptimal builds that are popular for whatever reason. So the first build is the one that Black Magic took in that game you replayed, did the replay analysis for, and that's the Vala AA build. Why is this a bad build to take?
So I'm not going to say it's a bad build to take, but most players who take it are taking it in non-optimal situations. I think the only time you can justify AA Vala is when you have a Tassadar and you have double support, and those 2 heroes together are allowing you to play very aggressively, so you finish the quest very, very, very early on, and generally you need to be doing it into double tank so that the counter swing onto you is not that aggressive. If you don't have a Tassadar, you shouldn't do it. Vala has multi-shot, which is an area damage build and gives her a lot of control with frost shot at 16, and it makes her a burst ability damage dealer in addition to being a sustained auto attack damage dealer, which means you now have 2 threats instead of 1. And she has her Q build, which is even burstier, but is single target if you can get it on an isolated target, and gives her a lot of dueling potential and gives her a lot of racing potential on objectives. So why would you give up having essentially a whole nother suite of tools in exchange to do something you already do pretty well a little tiny bit better?
So you want to make sure your Batman utility belt has multiple pouches, not just one, I guess is what you're saying.
Yeah.
Okay, Li Ming orb build. This is one that hurt me when you said this, because this is the build I always go. Why is it a bad one to take?
All right, so if you're up against good players, orb is very telegraphed as a objective. Like if I'm playing Zarya against Li Ming, I'm like, oh, that's free energy because I'm just going to save my shield for every single orb and walk into it on purpose. Good players will just not get hit by orb. Really, at a certain level of play, people don't move. And so Li Ming will actually rack up huge damage numbers by just constantly chucking orbs with the reset talents at 4 and 7. And I think last time I checked this at lower MMRs, orb build actually did have like a reasonable, like bronze, silver, gold. It actually has a pretty reasonable win. But as you go up the ladder, it drops off. And good players move. There's really just no way to put this. Good players move. This is the build where Li Ming stands really far back, goes glass cannon. No one dives her. If no one dives her, she can put out damage numbers. But is she securing kills? The critical part of Li Ming's kit is actually her trait. If you're not getting resets as Li Ming, regardless of the numbers you're putting up, you're not doing a very good job of playing Li Ming. And it's not her burstiest build. It's not her build most likely to secure resets. And by that metric, it's not a strong build. Also, orb scales at 3%. So as the game goes on and on and on, you're actually doing significantly less damage than her other builds do. In order to make up for this power drop, her ultimate's supposed to scale at 5%, her heroics, but orb drops off significantly in the late game unless you talent into nothing but damage. And if you talent into nothing but damage, you have no survivability, which means that if anyone looks at you funny, you're just dead.
Interesting. Maybe we'll have to start practicing some of my other Li Ming builds. Next on the list is Gul'dan Corruption build with Ariel. Corruption is typically the build I go, but if you got if you're the battery for Ariel, why should you be going the Fell Flame build?
So Corruption build is the burst build. Once you finish the quest and get the 16 talent, you throw out your E and it just wrecks people. If they get hit by multiple hits of it, they get the extra damage from the 16 talent. They're usually just going to die, but it's not sustained. It's bursty. In order to have consistent hope generation, you need sustained damage, which is why most of Ariel's hope generators are auto attackers. Gul'dan is the exception because Q is essentially a 1.5 second cooldown. It's essentially sustained ability damage as opposed to sustained auto attack damage. But in order to do it safely, you need the increased range from the level 1 quest because it increases the arc, which increases by default increases the range of the Q, which allows you to poke very, very safely. Corruption build was actually standard when Gul'dan was first released in competitive, and then a Korean player tried Q build purely as an Ariel hope generator, and they were like, oh, this actually works. And then Q build became the default because Q build, it turned out, did a lot of consistent damage, and it was really scary. Now we're seeing sort of a split. Some people go Q build, some people go burst. My opinion, if you need burst, you go Corruption. If you need sustained damage, you go Q. If you have an Ariel, you go Q.
Next on the list, Auto Attack Lunara. Tell me about this because I have no idea.
All right, so Lunara has some auto attack talents. Wild Vigor at 7, which is actually her most popular talent at that tier across all leagues in Hero League for the last 10 weeks, according to Hotslogs. Anyway, she's a popular enough hero that I think that's fairly reliable. Lunara's auto attack is nothing special. Lunara's not an auto attack hero. She's a trait hero. She does sustained ability damage with her trait, with poison over time. Her trait scales at 5%. She's a very late game hero. The later you go into the game, the more damage it does. And it actually becomes oppressive to deal with. Some supports just instantly get punished by late game Lunara. So Uther can't keep up with a Thornwood Vine Lunara in the late game. Splintered Spear helps you spread your trait. That's what it comes down to. If you correct use of Splintered Spear, you're going to get your trait on all 5 heroes at the start of every team fight. And if they line up, you get another Thornwood Vine. You can keep the trait going on them for pretty much the entirety of a team fight pretty consistently. So it's generally better in coordinated play to maximize Lunara's trait advantage and get everyone really low, and then have another hero whose job is to be the burst/finisher. Right? That's the ideal. In Hero League, obviously, this doesn't work out as ideally. The second auto attack talent that Lunara has that people take pretty frequently is Giant Killer. If you take unfair advantage, just counting your own slow that you have, unfair advantage is about 2/3 of the damage of Giant Killer, but it's against all the targets affected by your poison, not just the target you're auto attacking. So if you're trying to spread damage and make the healer's job really hard, but that involves a slow style of play, which again may not be viable in Hero League. So I understand why people go Giant Killer. I understand why Giant Killer has a really high win rate. But Splintered Spear has a significantly better win rate than Wild Vigor Lifetime. Actually, let's just look at my Master's Diamond real quick. Siphoning Toxin is the highest win rate. Actually, that's funny. Only 2,000 games, though. We're not counting that. But I just think if you're going to maximize the value of Lunara, you ought to go for the things that she excels at and leave the other things to the rest of your team. Obviously, if you have a draft where there's no finisher and you are forced to be the individual playmaker for your team, you're not even going to go Thornwood Vine. You're going to go Leap. You're going to try and secure kills on your own. It's also worth noting that Leaping Strike is a burst mechanic if you need one. You don't need to sacrifice your 7 in order to have a burst mechanic.
Gotcha. Are there any other suboptimal popular builds you want to maybe note here before we move along?
No, I think it's interesting that for that particular build, and I wanted to add this, it's considered you would never do AA Lunara in competitive because you draft with this consideration where you're fulfilling certain roles in the draft. But in Hero League, it actually, at some MMRs, does have a certain amount of success. It's not greater than the greater success; it's about equal. But it's interesting that the game hasn't gotten to the point where the coordination you get from competitive and the coordination you get from Hero League are anywhere close to each other.
Yeah. And luckily, this is one of the few that I was actually doing the proper builds according to Cavalier Guest here, and I rarely ever took a Lunara build. So I can pat myself on the back there for at least one of these 4. So LiQuiuD, I know you've been dying to talk about Leoric for a couple of weeks now. You had an internet outage which stopped you from attending last week's show. So do you want to talk about Leoric a little bit? In front of Cavalier Guest, you better be careful what kind of strategy you talk about here, sir.
Not really, but I will. All right, so bearing in mind that this is just my personal take on Leoric, and I have nowhere near the time studied on Warrior players that Cavalier Guest does, okay? So with that said, my little caveat of, yes, I know I don't know everything. I actually love new Leoric over old Leoric. I've played a number of games with him since the patch dropped. I have been enjoying it. I feel like this is the part that people seem to not always agree with me on, that he actually solo lanes just fine now. I've seen a lot of people say, no, he doesn't. Well, your mileage may vary. I've had no problem solo laning with him.
It's worse. It's not bad. It's just worse. He lost I can't do math. He lost 20% of his sustain in lane when he's 1v1ing someone. That's pretty significant. But it's not bad. It's just worse.
But his wave clear feels so much better now.
It's identical. It's still 8.2 seconds.
I know, but it feels better, man.
It's literally identical. It still takes exactly the same amount of time to clear a wave.
But which is why, like I said, this is how the way I interpret it, right? Because you're right. If you go strictly math, it's the exact same amount of time to clear a wave that it used to be. I don't know. I like the way it feels. Like his playstyle feels more like what I'm looking for. I don't know.
Is it identical? I mean, he has the skeletal swing, and then he has his autos, which also cleave, right?
Yes.
Your mic's muted, Kev.
It's identical. It used to be that it was 2 Qs to clear a wave, and Q was 8 seconds, and now it's 1 Q and a round of 4 cleave autos. Right. And if you hit a hero with your Q and you get the cooldown reduction, it's like it's the same. There was extensive testing in the PTR about whether or not any of his breakpoints had changed. Like, does he have faster wave clear at certain levels? His double soak build is dead, for the record.
Yes.
Which I'm not happy about because it was cool. So yeah, his wave clear in a solo lane is identical. His sustain is a little bit worse, not substantially worse. It is technically a little bit better 1 to 4 in some cases because fealty was moved to 1, and fealty is a crazy talent. Fun fact, fealty applies to all minions, not just enemy minions or your allied minions. A lot of people miss that in the tooltip. So it's actually 14% per, both waves clashing into each other of your health back every 30 seconds.
Is it
Yeah.
both minions now?
It's always been that way. It has been that way from day one when it was implemented into the game.
I did not realize that.
Yeah.
The things you learn when you've got Cavalier Guest on the show.
I mean, look, there's a reason I didn't want to do this specific segment right now. But that's okay, because I will make up for it and I will win the debate again tonight. And so everything will be restored back to normal. Anyway. All right. You know what? I'm just going to ask you, how do you feel about March now?
you're giving
March
up.
is the default heroic. The cooldown reduction is too insane. The sustain it gives you is too insane. I was just casually 5v1ing people on PTR, which granted PTR is bad matchmaking, but then it came to live and I was casually 3v1ing people with March. So that's not normal. Most people have no idea how to play against March, and most people have no idea how to line up their marches. You have to pre-use Q to set up a good march, because unless they have a movement ability, they're guaranteed to get hit by 2 swings once they're slowed by March, especially if you took Paralyzing Rage at 4 for the increased slow. So you're guaranteed 2 hits of March, which if you're hitting 2 heroes is 48% of your health back, just like instantly. Feels good. It's actually ridiculous on a 50-second cooldown to have that level of just, yeah, I'm casually going to win this lane now, thanks.
So now the question I have to ask, because this is actually one of the things I do struggle on. Is it level 20? Do you like Death March or do you like Spectral Leech still?
I like Death March. Death March was an insane talent before, when it was not talented.
Right.
Drains. And it's just a question of getting that level of execution. I think Burning Despair is probably the most consistent talent at that tier. Just because area damage seems to always be really good. But if I'm going to go March of the Black King, the playmaking potential of Death March, especially at a reasonably high level of play, I think is quite high if I go for W talents. If I go for no W talents, if I'm doing Ominous Wrath plus Royal Focus, which, by the way, is a build I underrated on PTR. I read the patch notes and I was like, that could be good. Turns out that build's pretty insane if you're with a team that is willing to force the fight. You just Wraith Walk into them and reduce all their damage by 50% and then Q them and then do it again. Just like for 8 seconds, they're doing half damage and your team's on top of them, wailing away at them. And it's frustrating to have that so completely reduced. So yeah, depending on your 13 and 16 talents, I definitely think there's variation in this 20, but I like Death March a lot.
Okay.
So
cool.
What's your go-to build, LiQuid?
Yeah, we're not going to use my go-to build because I haven't had a chance to update it. I put it in there so I could update it tonight, since the show notes will go out tomorrow morning. So, yeah.
That's okay. We can save that till next week as well, because we do want to make sure we get this HOTS debate in, and it's something that I've been dying to get through. So, without further ado, and guess what, guys? I've actually queued up the bumper this time.
No way.
It's time for the HOTS debate.
True power resides in the dark side of the Force.
No. Quicker, easier, more seductive, perhaps.
This is not a matter of debate.
A debate? This has become.
Okay, so this is a semi-regular. I paid $5 good. Oh, actually $10.
That was like my favorite one that you have.
I had to pay $5 for a Yoda impersonator and $5 for a Darth Vader impersonator to do that dialogue. But that was our bumper for the HOTS debate. It's a semi-regular segment that we do on the show, where we take a topic that we debate. We have 2 hosts of the show. One will defend the topic and one will rebuke it, and we'll have the format as follows. The defender is going to start with 2 minutes for an opening statement. The rebuker has 3 minutes to rebut that statement, and the defender has 1 minute back again for rebuttal. The moderator, which is going to be me for today, is going to ask the rebuker and the defender one question each. They'll have 1 minute for the response. Then the rebuker has 2 minutes for closing statements, and the defender has 2 minutes for their closing statements. All in all, it takes about 15 minutes or so. So the topic for today is one that I think is very interesting. It's Quick Match is a healthy game mode for Heroes of the Storm. I think there's a lot of polarized opinions about this. So defending this statement is going to be LiQuiuD. A couple other notes. The loser of this debate that we're having tonight is going to have to wear a bow tie for all appearances on Twitch next week. That's an homage to Cavalier Guest, who is often seen donning a bow tie, for those that you don't know. And one other rule that I forgot to point out as well, each participant gets one audible. So this is where they can interrupt the other side just by saying audible throughout the course of the debate to stop them to make a 15-second statement, typically if there's something erroneous or they just feel like they need to disrupt the flow of their speech. So, that being said, LiQuiuD is defending his crown. He's 4-1 so far. He's on quite the hot streak. He thinks this can redeem himself for his embarrassing performance talking about Leoric just previously on the show. So, LiQuiuD, are you ready to get going?
Do I have a choice?
No. LiQuiuD, you've got 2 minutes. You're on the clock. Quick Match is a healthy game mode for Heroes of the Storm. Go ahead and start defending, sir.
Okay, so Quick Match is actually a great format in Heroes of the Storm. It's required for a couple of reasons. One of those reasons is some people need something that's between AI, even though we're getting an improved AI, and unranked draft. You need something where you can say, you know what? I want to play Dahaka today. I want to learn Dahaka. This is how I'm going to do that. I don't need to rely on the draft to do this. I just need to be able to, jam games in as Dahaka against other human players. Maybe you've already worked against AI and you feel confident against AI, but you need humans to kind of give you that X factor and that something that really knows how to play. We can all agree that the AI in this game is a little sketchy, even though Blizzard says they are working on it. So you have to have something, and that something is Quick Match. Now, I can agree that there are many trolls in Quick Match. There are many people that probably should not be in Quick Match yet and maybe should do a couple more AI games. But it's definitely a mode that needs to be there just for, you're learning a character. Maybe I want to come home and just get a couple of games in real quick on like Johanna, because I don't really draft her that often. She's not where she should be in the meta, in my opinion. People don't like it when you draft her sometimes, so maybe I want to just come home and play a couple Johanna games. Maybe I just want to go out and bust out this brand new loadout I got from these sweet, sweet boxes that I earned. I'm not going to do that necessarily in a draft because I take drafting a little more seriously than I do Quick Match. But I want to show off to 9 other people. Check out my sweet swag. I mean, come on, man. Sometimes you just got to do that and have a good time. So Quick Match is the place for that. I do think there are people that take Quick Match way too seriously. Those people need to back it down a little bit and realize that maybe unranked draft or maybe the toxic nest that is Hero League is the place for you to be. Yeah, you know what? I'm gonna go ahead and leave my last 15 seconds off. I think that covers it.
Fair enough. Mystic, do you have a defense prepared for that?
Well, by right of this duel, I'd like to nominate a champion, and I choose Cavalier Guest. I'm throwing him into the ring.
LiQuiuD, over the course of last week, you may have noticed I never anywhere said that Mystic's going to be the one against you in this debate.
Oh my God, you guys are killing me here.
Well, on the bright side, you've got your chance to defend yourself against that poor Leoric performance earlier by trying to beat Cavalier Guest in a debate about Quick Match. So, Cav, you've got 3 minutes. You're on the clock.
All right, so my objection to Quick Match as a game mode in Heroes of the Storm is that Blizzard intentionally designed a game where the draft is critical. There are hard counters to certain heroes in the draft that significantly increase the execution cap. Supports are basically mandatory. One of the reasons that Blizzard implemented the Quick Match rule, where a support, especially healer-style supports, can only be paired against other healer-style supports, was because the win rate was so divergent. In addition to that, there are heroes that have 20-point swings on different maps in terms of their win rate and whether or not, and that makes them viable versus not viable on certain maps. You don't know what map you're playing on in Quick Match when you go in. If you are playing Vikings and you get to them, you're just like, oh, well, that's a loss. There's really literally no way that I should win this map with Vikings. So you can't practice the heroes you want to practice in quick match in a lot of cases, because you're not going to get maps where they're viable, where you're going to go into a draft mode and play them on those maps. At best, it becomes an arena for practicing mechanics and not game knowledge, which there probably does need to be some sort of game mode where you can practice purely mechanics and not have to go into the considerations of draft. Drafting is very intimidating. But we're gonna talk about the Overwatch event. There were people who came in from the Overwatch event and hated quick match, did their games and left and never came back. The competitive side of this game is so incredibly deep, and players who enjoy quick match, for whatever reason, when they first come into the game, tend to not like draft modes. They don't like unranked draft, they don't like Hero League. Whereas people who would love the competitive aspect of this game do not get that competitive aspect in Heroes of the Storm. They don't ever get to play the actual game before they judge it, and it's resulting in a very slow trickle of people coming into the game, even when we have these big events that constantly try to draw them in, and Blizzard keeps constantly trying to build the pool. My suggestion, blind draft or blind pick. You go into a lobby, you know the map you're playing, you can lock in any hero you want, there's no bans, you don't know what the enemy team's picking, you can still have mirror matchups. But if you have a bad comp, you have a bad comp. You picked it on purpose. You're going to learn something about why your comp doesn't work versus whatever their comp was. This is going to affect the meta a little bit. There's going to be more heroes that are more reliable in this style environment, but at least you're going to know the hero is viable on the map. And you're going to be able to, this is an important consideration, you're going to remove all the special matchmaking rules that have slowly slowed down queue times in quick match, so it's no longer actually quick.
Right. So, LiQuiuD, I see you jotting down notes feverishly there. Now, you know, we've got to take this a little bit more seriously. You've got a minute, sir. You're on the clock.
Okay, while I do agree that there are some maps that are not good for some heroes, learning mechanical skills against other players is important. The AI will never punish you enough where you cannot learn those mechanical skills strictly against AI people. So you have to have players. Yes, it does suck. Yes, I do agree that it would be great if in some faraway land we could have this magical new method of playing the game. Actually, I kind of like this blind pick style, but unfortunately, just don't have that right now. So we have to look specifically at whether quick match is healthy, given the absence of this awesome blind pick method. And so we kind of have to do that. Now, I want to address the specific point that Cavalier Guest brought up about the Overwatch players hating quick match. I agree. Those players did hate quick match. But you know what I would point to is that in subsequent events, Blizzard said, we really screwed up there. We need to let these guys just get wins in whatever game mode they want so that we're not toxifying quick match. And they switched that, and you could do those games in AI. So, yeah.
Your time is up. Okay, I've got a question now for Cavalier Guest. You're going to have 1 minute to respond to this. Now, I'm looking back on my days a couple years ago. Never played a MOBA before. I came into Heroes of the Storm from Hearthstone of all games because I saw it in the launcher. I went in, I played several AI games, and the first thing I did was, after that, felt comfortable enough to go into quick match. I did actually like how it was easy. You just picked a hero and you press the start button, and that's what you had to do, not having a ton of game knowledge going in. To me, as a new player, it seemed like an easy introduction into like playing against real people. Do you think you're alienating any sort of the population by eliminating a quick match mode and changing it into what you're describing before?
I do think you're going to alienate some people, but you're going to alienate people who probably wouldn't be interested in the learning curve of a MOBA anyway. I think every single MOBA on the market is accepted to have a substantial learning curve. Pros in League of Legends and Dota will tell you it takes about a year to learn all the heroes, to learn all the interactions, to have that level of game knowledge. There's a steep learning curve. It's a game with enough strategic depth, with enough different heroes, with enough interactions, and the maps make it even more complicated than other MOBAs in some regards. Not all regards, but in some regards, the maps make all those hero interactions more complicated. So, do you want to be honest about the product that you're offering when people first log into the game and be like, yes, this game is complicated, but it has a lot of fun mechanics. It's really cool. You're going to get to learn a lot, and you're going to get to win by outthinking your opponent in a lot of cases. Or you want to throw them in a situation where, in a lot of cases, they're going to auto lose because they don't have game knowledge. And I do think that in addition to my blind pick mode, there needs to be some sort of increase in educational content from Blizzard.
Time. Okay, my question for like a minute goes by fast, Cav. My question for LiQuiuD. Now, kind of in a similar situation too. As a new player, I felt like going through Quick Match, I had to unlearn a lot of things that I learned in Quick Match when I made the transition to unranked and ranked play. Now, do you think that Quick Match is an okay place to start, or is this fostering bad game knowledge and bad mechanics going forward for any new players? LiQuiuD, you're on the clock.
Okay, so while I do agree that when you jump into like a hero league or a team league where you're probably a little more coordinated than you were in Quick Match if you were solo queuing into Quick Match, I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing. Take, for example, the difference between going into hero league and team league. Similar situation. Or team league into a true outside of the game league, like a custom game like Chair League or Heroes Hype, Tempo Storm, or even Open Division, or even HGC. God willing, you're that good and you end up qualifying for HGC. There's always going to be a period of, okay, I was good in Hero League. Now I have to relearn to play with 4 of the same players all the time. Okay, I was good in Team League. Now I have to learn that scrims are more important than just Team League so I can get to the next step in my evolution. Okay, I won Open Division. Now I'm going into the Crucible. Holy crap, these pro teams are way better than me because they're doing X, Y, and Z, and I'm not doing those things. So that kind of method of learning will always be the case when you're trying to elevate your game to the next level.
Good timing there. Okay. Cavalier Guest, you have 2 minutes for your closing statement. Everyone, don't forget you've got 1 audible still remaining. All right, 2 minutes. You're on the clock.
So I think the arguments for Quick Match and the arguments against Quick Match are pretty clear cut, but I want to bring up one more that did not get considered. Last year, Blizzard at BlizzCon said that 50% of games in Heroes of the Storm were Quick Match, and that number was going down as people were starting to explore other game modes, unranked draft, Hero League, Team League. So as people get more into the game, they move on to other modes. But what's the number one complaint that people have constantly about this game? It's level of game knowledge and matchmaking. Because QM doesn't teach you the quote-unquote real game where you have tanks, where you have supports consistently, where you have zoning, where you have sustain mechanics, where you control objectives, where you sometimes trade objectives for other things. When you move into those other game modes that are the real game of Heroes of the Storm, and it's, you know, obviously Blizzard thinks that way too because HGC is considered competitive, Hero League is trying to be competitive, they're trying to adjust it. You have to, as LiQuiuD said, or not LiQuiuD, as Daz said, you have to unlearn things. You have to unlearn things that you thought were true and end up being untrue about the game. The only thing Quick Match gives you is mechanics. It doesn't give you game knowledge. It doesn't give you knowledge of drafting, compositions. It doesn't do any of that. So there should be an introduction mode. There should be gated map tutorials where you can't get queued into a map until you've gone through the tutorial and understand some of the dynamics. There needs to be more educational content built into the client. This is critical. Blizzard already agrees with this. We know that for a fact because they're doing the Play with a Pro series that they just posted about today, where they're trying to increase game knowledge. They realize that this is the problem, and they realize that seeding from QM, when QM is a game mode that doesn't have any relation to Hero League, has caused massive problems in terms of enjoyment of the game for everyone who's really dedicated to the game. And fixing a problem that's causing issues for your most dedicated players should be your number one priority when you have a game that is going to be the long term what you're looking for Heroes of the Storm.
All right, LiQuiuD, you've got your final 2 minutes.
Okay, so I'm gonna close with a couple of things. While I do agree that you do have to relearn certain things, and I do agree that that can be difficult, I would point out that in QM you can actually get some game knowledge around the map specifically, just like you can out of AI, right? You can learn when the right time is, or when a more opportune time is to get a boss. Or, oh my God, we wiped these people. Should we be looking at boss, or should we be doing this instead? In an AI game, you typically wipe the other AI team relatively quickly, especially if you get people that are just trying to pound out a couple of quests real quick. And actually, from my own experience, I've discovered that there are times where playing with AI or playing in an AI game, you don't learn as much on a hero, right? Because what typically happens, you get 3 to 4 other people that are in that AI game with you, and they just want to push a lane, kill the core, move on to their next one because they're just trying to knock out a quest, especially during some kind of holiday type event, right? Where in QM, it's more, okay, we need to win and we have to react to how these other players are playing against us. So I would point out that you can get some map knowledge there and you can get some game knowledge, not necessarily the same level that you might get in other game modes. And I do agree with Cavalier Guest. Clearly, there's a gap here, right? But I'm not trying to say that QM is bad. I'm trying to say that, yeah, it would be nice if we had an additional way for us to learn the game as opposed to just the 4 modes we have now. But since we only have those 4 modes and Blizzard hasn't released them, QM is actually a decent place to do those things. And I guess the last thing I would do is I'd like to tie this back into like a regular sport. If you played Rec League and then you moved into junior high, you're going to learn a lot of different things going from Rec League into a junior high sport. And the same is true going into like high school football out of junior high football. And then into college football, completely different game than you played in high school. And again, God willing, you're good enough to make it in the NFL, completely different game than what you played in college. It's all about learning the differences as you move through the tiers of the game that you choose to play. And for us, that's Heroes of the Storm.
Nice little segue out there, LiQuiuD. I'm impressed. Not a single audible was thrown. I think that's the first debate we've had where neither combatant has tried to throw the other one off of his game. Anyway, I'm dropping the straw poll link into chat. Feel free to vote on who you think won the debate. And again, the loser is going to have to wear a bow tie for all their appearances on Twitch.
Now,
hold
on a second. I have a complaint to lodge.
An official complaint. Let's hear it.
While I will probably lose, and I do not mind wearing the bow tie if I do lose, I would like to see something different out of Cavalier Guest if I should win. Because he already wears the bow tie like 90% of the time when he's on Twitch.
But now he's going to have to do it 100% of the time.
I actually only wear bow ties for casting and other special events. I don't wear it during my normal streams.
There you go. And that's only quote unquote if he loses. We'll have to see how that straw poll shakes out. We'll close the poll in a few days, so you'll have a little bit of time, LiQuiuD, to rally up your Russian botnet to try and get your upvotes there. But thanks to Cav for subbing in for Mystic there. I'm sure Mystic appreciates it. We actually had a question in the chat if we're going to make this, if we were considering making this a regular show, the debate. I think we'd all live about 10 years less if we did that. While we all do love doing this debate periodically, I think it's something that we enjoy doing in small spurts, so it's something that we won't be doing consistently as like a standalone show. But thanks for the question though, and I mean it is a great segment. We do love doing it, and this is one that actually was a reader suggested segment that we've taken, I think, since maybe episode 6 into the current form of the show too. But this is where we're gonna sign off though. Thanks, everybody, for listening to the Nexus Trolls, a Heroes of the Storm podcast, which we stream live on Twitch channel, twitch.tv/trollsgg, every week on Wednesdays at 7:30 p.m. Eastern, 4:30 p.m. Pacific. So, Cavalier Guest, where can people find you if they're looking for you on the internet?
I'm at twitch.tv/Cavalier Guest. I'm at twitter.com/Cavalier Guest. My drafting articles get posted on gfe.gg. Those are going to be updated because hero changes and reworks, and Blizzard likes messing with me. I swear, every time I finish a guide, Blizzard immediately changes every hero associated with that guide, like instantaneously.
It must be so tough because like just constantly having to go back and update everything. Like do you update the Art of the Tank periodically too, or? I
do. The Art of the Tank is updated periodically. My individual tanking guides get updated periodically. I'm 3 months behind, I think, on changes for those right now. And I was just like, okay, clearly they're reworking tanks. I'm going to stop until they finish reworking tanks, and then I'm going to go through and do a major pass. And they actually have touched, I was right. They've touched quite a lot of tanks since then. It's interesting because I did an interview. I'm okay. I won't go into that. You can find me on the internet at twitch.tv/podcast. I stream at 1 p.m. PST Monday through Friday, doing all sorts of analysis for Heroes of the Storm at different levels. From pro play to analyzing viewer replays so that people can improve the game. About the game, I do PTR streams whenever PTR is available, doing new hero analysis or rework analysis, trying to predict the meta. And I try and make my stream as educational as possible, so if people have questions, it's a good place to learn.
Well, Cavalier Guest, you're always welcome back on our show. We're really happy to have you here. Great analysis. You put LiQuiuD in his place talking about Leoric as well. So much they had to stop his segment midway through because I think he was a little self-conscious about the criticism you'd have of what his builds were going to be. But LiQuiuD, that being said, where can folks find you?
So best place to find me is actually on Twitter at LiQuiuDGG, LiQiuDGG. That's usually where I tweet before we go live with any of these shows, plus any random esports news I happen across. And stay tuned. Trolling HGC is coming up in about 20 minutes.
And Mystic, how about you, bud? How's your Twitter account coming?
It's still going. You can find me at Mystic Shroud on Twitter.
What's it gonna take to get an avatar for you, sir? I'm tired of looking at that gray blob guy with the blue background. I thought after like hassling you about it for the past 4 or 5 weeks, at least you get one of those things in there.
I mean, we know he's got a picture because it's gonna be on the next iteration of the website. So
is it gonna take us trying? Is it gonna take me and LiQuiud hacking Twitter?
I'll put that one.
That's your homework for next week.
Well, I got to point out something. So look, man, if you make the team that you're currently working on making the team for, you're gonna have to tweet occasionally. So
I definitely will.
All right, well, that's Mystic's homework for the week. Hopefully he'll have a more updated Twitter profile. But if you're looking to follow Mystic, where can they follow you, Mystic?
At Mystic Shroud on Twitter.
And if you're looking for me, I'm at DazHots. And thanks again to all our Patreon supporters. If you like the show and you're looking for a way to support us, you can do so over at patreon.com/trollsgg. You can subscribe to our show on iTunes, Google Play, Stitcher, or wherever you happen to find your podcasts online. And you can visit our website at trolls.gg/the Nexus Trolls to watch this and past shows, along with past video streams, which can also be found on our YouTube channel. That website is going to be updated within a week or two. We've got a great looking website with a lot of new content coming up, so keep an eye out for that at trolls.gg. And for announcements about the show in general, here's the Storm News. You can follow us on Twitter at the Nexus Trolls. If you want to hang out with us in the Trolls community in-game, you can /join TrollsGG, one word, in-game. Or you can join our Discord channel, trolls.gg/discords, where you can find the link for that. And finally, if you need to get in touch with us, the best way is by email at thenexustrolls@trollsgg. Cav, thanks again for guesting. LiQuiud, Mystic, thanks again for hosting as always. Everybody, have a great week.